Ancient culture research has shown that the Egyptians were technologically far ahead of their time. It is commonly known that hygiene had a minor role in their daily life as well. How did the Egyptians maintain their personal hygiene? Did you know that considering the era they lived in, they kept the place extremely clean? Because they lacked sanitation and other modern conveniences, societies like ancient Egypt had to be resourceful and ingenious to survive. The primary predictor of quality of life for the ancient Egyptians was social rank. Whether they had a toilet or had to take a bath in a river full of crocodiles, the ancient Egyptians had several peculiar hygiene practices that set their society apart. A breath of mint a day kept the odor away. Theath Mint Heziri, the earliest known dentist, is thought to have served Pharaoh Djoser in the 3rd dynasty of Egypt in 1600 BC. Ancient Egyptians put a high value on having clean breath, so they made sure they had easy access to a number of methods that might cover up or get rid of bad breath. Many different plants, including parsley, were reported to be chewed on by them throughout the day and after meals. Honey was combined with boiling herbs and spices like cinnamon and myrrh to make breath mints for people whose breath smelled as bad as the armpits of the lower class. The world's oldest toothpaste recipe was discovered in a collection of papyrus scrolls kept at the National Library in Vienna, Austria. The combination, which includes dried iris flower, salt, pepper, and mint, is lauded as being novel because iris is an effective treatment for gum disease. Surprisingly, scientists have just recently learned that the iris has therapeutic properties, supporting the resourcefulness of the ancient Egyptians. The circumcision procedure for hygiene was quite popular. Although there is disagreement among anthropologists over the origins of circumcision, it is known that the practice dates back to 4000 BC in Egypt. The more affluent strata would frequently hold large-scale circumcision ceremonies, where they were accepted as cleanliness and puberty rituals. Even while it might have been continued for other reasons, some historians believe that the original driving force for this practice was the demand for cleanliness. Experts believe that uncircumcised men were prohibited from entering the sites because they were thought to be impure based on inscriptions found in temples and tombs. Many women developed the habit of shaving their pubic hair or experimenting with other natural hair removal methods. The most popular technique for removing pubic hair was shaving. In addition to preparing them for sexual relations, women believed that engaging in this routine helped them ward off fleas and lice. Egypt's detoxification methods were far ahead of their time. As seen by their advanced mummification technique, the ancient Egyptians had a keen interest in the human body and aspired to learn more about human health. Despite the fact that many of them were priests and frequently held the belief that illness was the result of offending the gods, doctors also practiced medicine. To aid with intestinal cleaning, they suggested taking laxatives or purgatives. Many Egyptians believed that using laxatives 3 days a month would help the body get rid of illness. They used castor oil to expel waste, even while attempting to treat diarrhea. The Egyptians also used enemas to clean their insides and hired proto-proctologists to examine their anuses. Deodorant was used to mask their body fragrances prior to the 20th century. Everyone was probably a little smelly, and many people still struggle with this now. The Egyptians, who are frequently credited with inventing the first deodorant, utilized a variety of spices to try to cover up their foul odors, including citrus and cinnamon. They blended and ground a variety of smells, including the blossoming evergreen bushes of a carob tree, to create natural deodorant pellets that they stored in their armpits. They also had their underarm hair removed because they discovered it reduced their offensive odor. Legend has it that the Greeks adopted the Egyptian habit of dabbing perfume under the arm, but it wasn't until the discovery of sweat glands in the late 18th century that the connection between body odor and perspiration was clearly understood. The primary purpose of eye makeup was quite similar to ours. Cosmetics were employed by both men and women in ancient Egypt, due to the additional advantages they provided in addition to improving their looks. After moisturizing their skin with oils and using honey or aloe face treatments, they would begin by applying eyeshadow, mascara, and eyeliner. Eyeliner was widely used to ward off bothersome flies and protect eyes from the sun's glare in addition to making a fashion statement. Kohl was frequently called upon for this work. Natural substances like malachite and galena would be ground into a powder by people. The cream would next be created by combining the powder and fat, and the finished cosmetics would be kept in jars. Those of better social status had access to elaborate jars made of fine materials, but those of lower social standing made their own cosmetic jars from cheaper, simpler materials. Despite taking all these safety measures, the Egyptians also practiced some abhorrent personal hygiene practices. The bathing establishments would creep you out. People defecated outside because toilets were only owned by the wealthy. A large number of the opulent Egyptian toilets had limestone seats. The awful job of emptying the sand-filled box that the stone was resting on fell on someone. The less fortunate often relieved themselves outside in a hole they dug themselves. Many people used the Nile as their bathroom, despite the fact that the river's water was also utilized for drinking, bathing, and washing clothes. The ancient Egyptians routinely discarded waste and other items in pits, open spaces, and canals because they lacked sewage infrastructure, which contaminated the river and the fields where they grew their food. The Egyptians struggled with disease brought on by unclean conditions, rats, parasites, and insects, which took many lives every year despite their best attempts. The lice and hair. The Egyptians had their fair share of problems defending themselves against rats and parasites. To get rid of head lice, men, women, and kids would shave their heads, and priests would do the same every other day so that no lice or any other filthy thing may come upon them when they serve to the gods. While shaving might temporarily be helpful, other repellent treatments were questionable. For example, it was believed that a warm date meal and water solution would repel fleas and lice. To keep mice out of clothing, cat fat would be applied on everything imaginable. One technique was to sprinkle a salty natron water solution around the house to get rid of and repel fleas. They wore real human or horsehair wigs to conceal their shaved heads. The wealthy typically had several different looks they could don depending on the situation. If lice did manage to infest the wig, it would be simple to discard it. In order to stay cool in the heat, wigs were often worn. However, because they could not afford expensive wigs, the lower classes frequently wore head coverings in their place or made wig-like things out of papyrus. Researchers have discovered numerous mummies with infestations of lice, proving that nobody was able to completely avoid the problem despite everyone's best efforts. Where and how people washed their clothing would definitely frighten you. For the majority of Egyptian history, people wore relatively few garments, but later generations grew larger wardrobes and insisted that what they wore be spotless. Clothing was often made of linen. The white linen made the dirt on the clothing quite obvious. This required more regular washing, which was a challenging process. The Egyptians gave men the job of doing the laundry since it was a labor-intensive process to remove dirt from the clothing. While the wealthy employed laundromats and paid domestic helpers to do their laundry, the lower classes were forced to wash their clothes in the parasite-infested water of the Nile River. The water was teeming with parasites and other disease-causing organisms, since the river was routinely used for both waste disposal and personal hygiene. When washing, there was also a danger that hippos or crocodiles hidden in the river could attack or perhaps kill you. We may claim that many practices that contemporary cultures have come to connect with the ancient Egyptians, such black eye makeup and wigs, were adopted not only for aesthetic reasons, but also as means of surviving in a land roasted by the heat and a time rife with parasites, insects, and vermin.